on News Talk.
Yesterday saw the first of many strikes, it looks like. These are strikes by French air traffic controllers, and we know, of course, coming through for Monday, there's going to be flight disruptions out of Heathrow because they are suspending flights that might cause noise over Queen Elizabeth's funeral. So with us, Eoghan Corry from editor of Air and Travel magazine. First of all, Eoghan, the strike yesterday, has that now washed through the system?
Good morning, Anton. Yes, washed through the system. Air France protected their long haul. They cancelled about 10% of their long haul. Most of what they cancelled, and they cancelled 400 flights, was short haul. Big deal because of the amount of disruption it caused, not just in France, but for overflights, Anton. And that's really the real haggle that the airlines had this morning.
In that you can't overfly France if there aren't French air traffic controllers to guide you through the process? Pretty
much. It's for 20 years, and the Galway man has been at the heart of this debate because Eamon Brennan is now in charge of Eurocontrol. The major airlines, one of the most vociferous, surprise, is Michael O'Leary. But Willie Walsh, he's the Secretary General of IATA, which is sort of FIFA, the aviation, the big international body. They've all been saying for many years the technology is there. If an aircraft is at a certain height, the Spanish, the Italians, the Brussels air control, traffic control can guide them through the same way as Irish air traffic control guides aircraft over the Atlantic, many kilometres away from Ireland. And air traffic control is very nationalistic, though, and one of the things that the 27 EU members have all preserved is we control our own airspace. And that's a big deal because the French unions, and we've three competing unions competing in terms of militancy, organising the 2,000 French air traffic controllers, that every time they go on strike, they really cause havoc. Some of the flights we lost from Dublin yesterday, one of them was to Faro, two of them were to Reyes. We lost Murcia, we lost Malaga. So it really causes problems, particularly as you might imagine in Barcelona, where you have to go through French airspace to virtually go anywhere.
What does it look like for autumn? Are we going to see more strikes?
Absolutely. There are three more coming in the end in 2 weeks' time. It's going to be a Wednesday, a Thursday, and a Friday. September is a surprisingly busy time, even though the schools have gone back. A lot of people move in September. It's one of the busiest months for international aviation. And the French unions know that. That's a political junkie, Anton. You know that the legislature elections didn't go well for Macron. He's about 40 votes short of getting his budget. Like ourselves, he's putting through that budget at the moment. The air traffic controllers are pushing very hard. Fairly vague demands, really, because in my time writing full-time about travel, I've covered about 200 air traffic control strikes. And it's not really going on strike for 7 and 6 pence extra a week. They look for things like guarantees on recruitment and stuff like that, complex negotiations. They walked out on it last Monday. They're going on strike pretty clear. It won't be solved in 2 weeks' time. So we're looking at more disruption. And when you quantify Ryanair, 420 flights lost, Air France 400. That's an indication of the reshaping of European aviation, that Ryanair are now more affected than Air France. But if you quantify all those threats of big strikes, cabin crew strikes, pilot strikes, all of that Ryanair was served with early, we lost 10 times the number of flights yesterday, Ryanair did, than all the other strikes they've had all summer. That's the level of power a small number of air traffic controllers in France have.
You mentioned having covered previous strikes. There are instances where air traffic control strikes can backfire significantly. I think back to the early 80s when Reagan effectively fired most of America's air traffic control and replaced them with A, chaos, and B, the military. I assume we are highly unlikely to see any significant changes in the way air traffic control is handled in Europe as a function of this.
That probably doesn't happen in France. So they're very quick to go to the barricades. But it has been dangled by particularly commentators, and as I say, Michael O'Leary amongst them, that there's lots of things they could do. You can actually declare a flight protected. It's something that the Spanish have been doing for economic reasons. They say, a flight is protected. It's of strategic value to the nation, so a strike is now illegal. And that happened a little bit during the summer. The French much more reluctant to go hardline on that. That, you know, the French tradition is very different. There are suggestions that you could call up people on the military, or call up people who are military reservists who are air traffic controllers. But it's really, these are all sort of final options, because there is a negotiation process, or this dream of the single European sky that I've been writing about for too long. It's going round in circles. And yesterday was a very stark reminder of how little progress has been made. We've had air traffic control strikes already this summer, but it tended to be the UNSA, the third of the unions, and their muscle is around Marseille. Yesterday it was the biggest union who really controlled Paris that went out, and that was the big reminder. It's about 41% in the syndicate controller, the traffic aérienne, and then the USAC has 25% and UNSA 22%. That's the Irish word for attack. I don't know if the French knew that when they were drawing up their union, but we've three competing unions in terms of militancy, and this problem is not going away. It caused not just the cancellations, but delays all over Europe yesterday, to about the average 20-25 minute delays. That impacts, if you're on a late Ryanair flight flying out of Dublin, it can end up an hour and a half late, not because of your flight, but because of the accumulated delays of those hard-working aircraft that Ryanair used from earlier in the day.
And just to check on, in relation to Monday then, which is separate to the French issue, the cancellations out of Heathrow, how significant are they? Because it is far from the totality of Heathrow's outbound and inbound that's being cancelled.
Absolutely. For about 2 hours, no inbound, and it's a noise restriction. It's a respect to the Queen restriction. It's sort of thing that would happen quite regularly at this time of the year with a major thunderstorms. There are no diversions that would happen in a weather event. All they've done is they've cancelled, and because of the frequency, we will have about, we used to have about 21 flights a day to Heathrow, but because of other restrictions, it's down to about 14, 15. We've lost three rotations from Aer Lingus and 2 from British Airways, but most of those can be shoveled onto earlier or later flights. It's more the sort of thing that would happen with a weather event rather than the mass cancellations that we are getting from the air traffic control strikes.
Eoghan, thank you very much. That is Eoghan Corry, who is editor of Air and Travel magazine.
The Anton Savage Show, Saturday morning at 9 on News Talk.